What is so special about this year's Saba Saba protest, and why is the government so afraid of it? A few days ago, President William Ruto made a surprise alteration in the army, placing David Keter as the army commander.
Lieutenant General David Kipkemboi Keter, commander of the Kenyan Army.
Just days after Nairobi and 22 other counties were rocked by fiery protests. Protests the government labeled an attempted coup. Ruto rose up to prepare himself for something bigger. Or is it? Many Kenyans were shocked when Ruto doused the dyes of military rearrangement, becoming a precursor to the Saba Saba protests. Let's break it down. First, he summoned all his elite top security officials for an emergency meeting at State House. This wasn't a routine check-in. It was a high-stakes gathering in response to the unrest that has been shaking Kenya. Hours later, a red carpet was rolled out at State House in Nairobi. But this time, it wasn't for the hullabaloo of calling protesters helter-skelter running criminals. It was for a military regalia, investiture of ranks ceremony.
The investiture of rank, Your Excellency, we present Major General Joel Muriungi Nturimi.
In a tightly choreographed event, President William Ruto presided over the swearing-in of newly promoted Kenya Defence Forces officers, a robust reconfiguration of the military's command structure, touching all three branches: the Army, Air Force, and Navy. At the center of attention was the promotion of Major General David Kipkemboi Keter to Lieutenant General and his appointment as commander of the Kenya Army. This shakeup raised eyebrows across the country. Why now? Just days after the deadly June protests. Shortly after, on June 29th, President Ruto left for Seville, Spain, and later proceeded to the United Kingdom for an official visit. One would sit back and wonder, are these security rearrangements and sudden trip abroad a sign he's anticipating something bigger? The only major event on the horizon, advertised heavily online, especially on X, is the Saba Saba protest set for July 7th, 2025. The timing feels too precise to be a coincidence. So, what's got the government so on edge? You see, since 1990, Saba Saba, meaning 7-7 in English, has been a call to action for Kenya's pro-democracy demonstrators. It's a day when Kenyans take to the streets to demand better leadership and accountability. Back then, protesters faced brutal crackdowns to push for multi-party democracy under President Daniel Arap Moi. Despite the government's attempts to stop them, July 7th could see protests hit Kenya every year. The striking similarity between the Gen Z protests of 2024-2025 and the 35th Saba Saba protests and the protests of the 90s is that both are centered on clamor for better leadership. Young Kenyans today are fed up with corruption, economic hardship, and police brutality, echoing the same frustrations of 35 years ago. But this time, social media platforms like X are amplifying their voices, making the movement harder to ignore. Let's rewind to June 25th, 2025. Nairobi and 22 other counties were rocked by fiery protests led by Gen Z, marking the anniversary of the 2024 anti-finance bill uprising. These demonstrations, which the government called an attempted coup, left at least 16 people dead and over 400 injured, many with bullet wounds. The anger was fueled by the death of blogger Albert Ojwang in police custody and ongoing demands for justice and economic reform. In many towns and cities, protesters clashed with police, torching police stations and looting shops. Both the protesters and the government came to an agreement. The anarchy was propagated by goons. These protests have rattled the government, forming the basis of fears that the 2025 Saba Saba protests could escalate into something bigger. The government has hinted at opposition figures funding the unrest to seize power illegally, but they have provided no tangible evidence to back this up. So how is this related to Saba Saba? Let's go back to 1982, when a failed coup attempt led by Kenya Air Force Private Hezekiah Ochuka saw rebels seize air bases and state radio station before being stopped by government forces. Ochuka was later hanged and went down into history as the only Kenyan who became president for 6 hours. And opposition leaders like Jaramogi Oginga Odinga and his son Raila Odinga were implicated. Fast forward to 2024, when the government blamed former President Uhuru Kenyatta, foreign administrations and civil societies for funding protests, again without evidence. Now in 2025, the same coup narrative is back. The government claims the June protests were an attempt to overthrow Ruto, and they are hinting at similar motives for Saba Saba. But with no proof, many Kenyans are skeptical. Is this a genuine fear or a tactic to justify a crackdown? President Ruto is clearly not taking chances.
Kama Kibaki alipewa 10, Uhuru alipewa 10, Mkenya mwingine atapewa 10 yake.
On the eve of July 7th, 2025, the government is tightening its grip. Multiple motorists traveling from Diani to Nairobi via the Mombasa-Nairobi highway reported an unusual number of police checkpoints. Passengers, especially those headed to the capital, were facing identity checks and repeated questioning about their residence and travel reasons. Pro-government leaders are on high alert, sending warnings of arrests and dire consequences for anyone participating in the Saba Saba protests this year.
Hakuna taifa lingine katika bara la Afrika ambalo lina demokrasia kama hii yetu. Wale wajanja si walijaribu wanasiasa wengine hapa, wakajaribu kwenda kwa nchi jirani. Nini lifanyika? Hawakutoka kwa airport, wakarudishwa. Lakini hapa
I've had messages from Israel, I've had messages from Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Dubai, America, Canada, Germany, and the UK. So one message that came to me was from a number from Germany, all right, that said, we are fundraising, we're raising money, we're going to make sure that we fund the invasion of all the politicians' houses.
Monday is not a public holiday. We are expected across the Republic of Kenya to be in our offices, in all the regional offices, in all the sub-county offices in the Republic of Kenya. In Nairobi, we are expected to report to work as per the human resource policies and procedures manual.
Kulingana na hii serikali ya Ruto na mzee Raila Odinga is the worst. Yani imefika mahali Raila anapigwa mawe mpaka Nyanza. Mpaka Nyanza Raila, surely. Raila wewe unafaa ufunguke macho pia. Mpaka Nyanza unafukuzwa. Hapa walikuwa nalipa watu ati ukipata mtu anaandamana upige. Hiyo ndio tunaendelea kuishi.
Meanwhile, the military is on standby, likely bolstered by Ruto's recent shakeup. Schools in Nairobi and other cities are closing, and traders are boarding up shops, fearing a repeat of June's chaos. But young people and pro-protest individuals aren't backing down. Posts on X show plans for peaceful demonstrations, with hashtags like Saba Saba 2025 trending. So why would the head Dimitri of state and commander-in-chief of the armed forces make drastic security changes just days before Saba Saba? It's very simple. The government is nervous. Gen Z's protests aren't just about economic grievances. They are a direct challenge to Ruto's leadership. Anything can happen. The youths are demanding accountability, an end to corruption and justice for those killed in protests. The military shakeup and increased checkpoints show Ruto is preparing for a potential escalation, possibly fearing a repeat of the 1982 coup attempt. But the more the government cracks down, the bolder Gen Z gets. Saba Saba protests could be a defining moment, either a peaceful push for change or a flashpoint for more violence. The world is watching, and Kenya's future is on the line. What do you think the Saba Saba protests will bring? Is Saba Saba a revolution in the making, or is the government's fear justified? Newsroom, Maisha TV, Bushabi Jr.